guys warmed up, and then we'll open up to the audience. So there are a lot of interesting angles that you guys discussed in app economy and enterprise apps. One thing that kind of popped up in my head is, when you're either building apps yourselves in your companies or advising others, there's no shortage of APIs and systems out there to use. We're looking at Google App Engine or Azure or Salesforce or Dropbox or Box or many others that are on the market. How do you essentially advise customers to get started? What are the platforms they should be looking at for what types of applications?
Just going to go a long one. Well, I guess I think that sort of the key trigger here has got to be really the data access that you need to have in order to create an app that's got some value. So I think that tends to drive you towards platforms that are owned and maintained by the big enterprise apps companies. So if you look, Oracle have their own middleware platform, SAP has their own, Salesforce of course has their own. And I think sort of picking one of those is probably a sensible route to go. It's not necessarily going to solve and allow you to build every application that you need, but I think that's probably down the angle that you need to look first. I think it's got to do with data.
So coming from a development angle, and then looking at apps which we consider to have a single nature and single function, then actually normally advising, you've got to use this one, isn't going to suit every application that we build. And we should be looking when we're developing and handing it to our developers and saying, look, as part of the solutions and development, what do you guys feel is best for this particular application? When you're trying to advise a client on what best APIs to use, then honestly, for business, go and look at the open source ones, go look at the free ones. Try and use the business model that's most suitable for your application and the one that's most scalable.
Whatever those two said. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the stuff that we currently do is within inside Salesforce. So we can use a Salesforce open API to go out and pull data from other applications and bring it in. But everything we're really doing is under the user, and the user profile sits within Salesforce.com at the moment. But it depends whether you want live or whether you want batch data coming in as well, of course. Batch. But most of the clients find that actually works okay.
I guess, sorry, if I can just there is one other alternative, which is if the enterprise that you're working for is using any sort of API management tool, then you can abstract away the back ends completely, and then you can build applications that are independent of the back ends. So there's a bunch of good products out there that provide API management independently of the back end and independently of the front ends. And
that's an additional layer of abstraction away from.
It's an additional layer of abstraction, but it means that you don't need to worry about, if there's 10 different data sources that need to be aggregated in order to feed a particular application, you can sort of worry about that in one place and not worry about it in your application.
I think, David, you touched on a point interesting about sort of the blurring between enterprise and personal app use. So one thing I love to ask people nowadays is, what's your favorite app?
It's my favorite app.
When I've asked a lot of people, I get a lot of answers. I was talking to a photographer once. He told me of an app called Sunseeker.
Yeah.
We can know where the sun is at any point in time and wherever you are for the best angles for photography. So I kind of asked the three of you, starting with you, David. Can be business, can be private. What's your favorite app and why?
Mine's probably pretty sad to bring up, but I'm very keen on wearables and stuff like 3D printing, and actually one of the apps that I have is just a command line tool that I've installed, and I can check out my source code and build it and test it against a Salesforce environment with the touch of a button. So that's actually my favourite one at the moment. It means I don't have to get into work early to start a build.
I'm not that sad.
Fair. No,
so
fair.
we've got Fitbit here. Yeah, Fitbits. I think that's one of my favourite apps. It's health and well-being. That's motivating you, using all the game mechanics, and that's actually how we originally got into this in the consumer side. Anybody heard of QuizUp?
Yep.
Yeah. That's a brilliant app. That's a fantastic app. So watch what that is doing, how it's live playing quizzes with anybody around the globe. Yeah, and that's testing your knowledge. So think about how you can take that live into a business environment with business processes as well. So they're my two favourite apps. Sorry.
I'm not sort of much of a gamer really, so my favourite apps tend to be like practical ones. So live bus information to me is like a killer application. I love that.
Yeah, knowing when the tubes are going to be late, absolutely.
Yeah. But the fact it's live is important, right?
No, there is. You can't ride your bike at this point in time.
That's right. Yeah. All of a sudden, it's become
Buses
very important. There is actually, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a rather nice app that tells you for each tube station in London, depending on which line you're changing to, what carriage you should get into. So.
I use it all the time.
Isn't that good?
Is that still Apple only though? Is that still on the iPhone? Well, fair, good answer. Good answer. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah.
That's great. I guess I'll ask my last question, then obviously open up for the audience. I guess when you think about sort of the app economy and existing businesses, think of an organization that has no app development in-house or has not started doing it, or what we would consider an app, which I think David offered a definition. What are the sort of building blocks that you think you might need, basic building blocks an organization might need to have to be able to start building apps? So Peter, if you want to start it off.
Well, my view is slightly jaundiced. So if you look at the history of cloud apps, if you think about the Salesforce platforms, it's platform as a service, then 80% of everything's done out of the box on that platform. So it meant that we focus purely on the business benefit and the IP that we bring to it as a provider. So to put that into real monetary terms, when we founded the company, it took us 6 weeks to find a client that would basically pay us, and within another 6 weeks we had an app to deliver to them. Okay, and that was an enterprise client, an enterprise solution that we were able to charge £30,000 per annum for as an application. So I think that's the key sort of thing. Is we have a very small development team. We work in very fast waterfall, agile cycles as well to get the product out there. But 80% of all the crap basically is done for us by the platform.
Ben, what's your view on that?
I think, I suppose we tend to work with large enterprises, and I think the biggest mistake I see with our clients is that they've not spent the time up front to sort of think through any sort of mobile strategy. What they've done is they've just gone and built sort of line of business solutions, and they create a huge problem for themselves downstream. So I think to answer your question, I'd say if you are in a large organisation, I'd say spend a bit of time up front to really think through a strategy and some sort of reference architecture and some tooling, and then I think it's like maybe that's sort of the boring way of doing it, but I think it's probably in the long run a cheaper way of doing it.
Sure.
And I think to add to that, when it comes to building an app without sort of having the expertise in house, the first thing you've got to do is work out if you need to actually go and build everything. We've got platforms, we have cloud, and we can start reusing bits and pieces off the shelf that can give us mobile apps. There's lots of ways and lots of platforms that give you mobile for nothing. There's also the point that actually, if we want to build an app, then what we really need to do is find some smart people who understand the frameworks and tooling that we can use and understand the business challenge to not go overboard and deliver something we don't need, but actually just fit for purpose.
Any questions from the audience?
Question for Peter. A couple of questions actually. So first of all, very interesting session. Thank you. Number one, you mentioned there's 5 million Salesforce users. Can you give us an understanding as to roughly how many orgs they represent and kind of what levels they're at? And then
When you say what levels, do you mean how many users per org?
moreover, as in kind of what level on Salesforce they're using? Are they, what
Complex
percentage
or?
of them would you consider enterprise customers?
Okay.
And then kind of coming back to you specifically about your presentation, have you got examples of gamification or game mechanics not working that you could walk us through?
Yeah, so the first question is, I'm not an employee of Salesforce.com anymore,
Sure.
but from what's in the public domain, we believe the user count's about 5 million. And what always used to be the case is a third. So a third were enterprise customers, a third were mid-market, and a third what we would call mums and pops. So sub sort of 20 users. And that's important to understand for us as an ISV, because the way we go to market, so we treat Salesforce.com as a customer now and a channel. So I spend a lot of my time in Salesforce.com's offices around Europe with their salespeople saying how we're going to drive better usage of their applications, training, stop attrition, get more deals and everything else as well. So but that's my own opinion, not Salesforce's.
And in total, those 5 million users represent how many organisations?
Those numbers aren't published anymore, but it's got to be over 200,000 now. Unless Xavier wants to jump in, but
Yeah, we officially say we've got over 100,000 organizations, but also what happens is as our product base has evolved, the definition of what a user is evolves as well, because you have the core CRM users, you've got people using the
Service
social media
clouds.
monitoring pieces. So that, and then you have things like Heroku, which is a platform for object-oriented programming. So it's what a user is has kind of changed a lot over the last 5-6 years. So.
yeah. And to your second question, where it doesn't work is where you overcomplicate it. So you can suffocate the user, because what happens, clients get very excited about game mechanics, And the reason why CRM systems fail is because they get over complex, they don't add value to the user, and everybody puts their oar into a screen, and suddenly it's pages and pages of data you're asking the end user to do, rather than seeing what value it adds to them and how they're going to be more professional, become richer by using the system. So what clients have done in the past is they try and gamify everything, and all you do is you just disenfranchise the user. So what we advise them to do is to keep it simple. However, what you then find is you get this massive surge of usage, because everyone wants to be top of the leaderboards on the levelling system, gets points and rewards, but it's actually sustaining it, and that's where you need to understand the difference between what we call your killers, achievers, socialisers, and explorers, and how you deploy it and how you motivate people. And that's why you need a service alongside. So we don't just supply an app, we supply a service that constantly keeps them engaged. So we sort of learn the mistakes, basically.
Sure.
No, so in terms of, when we look at taking the enterprise functionality that we offer and take examples of CRMs and HR management systems, by nature they serve the organisation, and that's where the data lives. It's on a wide scale, it's up there for every user, and therefore they're centralised repositories of information. If you try and take those and put those into individual user apps, and then imagine you say to an IT department, right, you cannot tell me what I want to use anymore, your challenge is now to support wherever I want in terms of user, then we start to see different CRM apps appear on mobile phones, and we start to silo our data again, then we completely defeat the objective of the enterprise application in the first place. So I don't foresee that being something that's going to ever happen. And in fact, the point is to find different functionality we can add to the user level, so we have a different channel for distribution, as well as taking and learning from that app analogy and putting it into our enterprise applications.
Okay. Questions?
Hopefully briefer.
Challenge, okay. Ben, you said that Microsoft are struggling in your presentation. Very common, I think. How do you view the introduction of Office, the Office suite onto iPad and iPhone as playing out in that enterprise mix? Do you think this is the death knell for Microsoft, who otherwise own the enterprise space in terms of old infrastructure and desktop PCs that people were using 10 years ago?
I think. Well, I think the sad thing really about Microsoft is that it's probably Nokia that really is the reason why they're struggling so much, because I think Nokia have really failed to bring out some compelling devices for. I probably shouldn't be saying this, right? It's just being recorded. Yeah. I think Nokia sort of failed to bring out really compelling devices for consumers. And I'm a Nokia user and phone user. As a phone, it's okay, but it's like an apps desert out there. It really is. It really is bad. And when I look at our customers, it's very interesting. I'd say 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, customers used to say to us, right, we want an application for iOS, and we'll think about Android sometime in the future. Now they say we need an application for iOS and Android at the same time. I mean, and Windows does not even feature. So I think that's where they're struggling really to gain traction. My personal view is what Microsoft should do is take a shitload of money, I mean seriously large amounts of money, and pay people to put great apps onto their devices, but not. And they do have programs. They have programs where they'll give you 30 grand or something. But I mean, an enterprise grade app or a killer B2C app that people use, costs £1 million. It doesn't cost £30,000. Sorry?
Did that work for
No, because I don't think they had the financial muscle to do that. And
I think they've had their day, though, Ben.
Sorry?
I think they've had their day, Microsoft.
Well, they might have done.
You say that, but you're looking at it from a point of view that's all about apps that we're using for user interaction. What about their back-end solutions like Azure?
Yeah.
And in terms of the cloud platform, their offerings are fantastic. Not only are they cost-effective and actually cheaper than some other parts of the industry, but
yeah. I don't think Microsoft are dead in the enterprise. I mean, if that was your original question, I think they're.
And we've had to move away because it's not reliable enough.
Yeah.
not reliable.
We're now on Amazon.
And what sort of scale, at what point in scaling did you find it unreliable?
It's the way, the nature of Azure is that everything goes down when it goes down.
Fine. Okay.
The sharding we put in place didn't work,
Right.
and we had to move away.
Because this is one of the things that I'm looking at the moment in terms of Amazon versus Azure, so it's very good information to know actually. Okay.
I could give you a different view later on.
We will talk about it later, happily, yeah, absolutely.
seeing a lot of concern around security when it comes to developing these kind of applications in the enterprise, and how are you dealing with those kind of concerns from enterprise customers?
So I think the sort of whole security question has been why people have been relatively slow to move off BlackBerry. I think that's probably one of the reasons. And we still come, it's just amazing to me that we still come across companies who will not abandon BlackBerry simply for that sort of perception of security, which I think is can be achieved with other solutions now. So many of the companies that we see don't systematically deploy device management in a good way. They might deploy. I mean, we've got lots of customers that have got 4 or 5 different device management solutions because they put a different one in every time they put a new application in.
But that's why they're not controlling it. The users starting to control it. Bringing their own device is so hard for them. I mean, it's a good and a bad thing, right? Because they're paying for their own devices, bringing them to work. So it's reducing your IT budget, but it opens up a security and control element as well. So you're having to balance that risk as a CIO.
So I think we're seeing we need to. I think organisations need to sort of tackle that whole device management area better, and there's a lot more technology around sort of containerization of applications and things like that are improving the security situation. But I think it's not something that is sufficiently well looked at, I think, by many companies before they jump into this space.
So do you think it's the enterprises that are making the mistake in adding the mobile device management solutions, the additional ones, or do you think it's just the fact that there's not any mobile device management solutions out there that really need to?
No, I think the solutions are out there. I think enterprises just aren't being systematic or sort of thinking it through. I mean, what I'm seeing is that device management is often left to sort of the infrastructure part of the organisation to solve, and it's seen, and then in that case it just becomes like who can supply the cheapest solution, and I think that's a mistake.
It's one of the number one requests that we see is to go mobile. In fact, Salesforce themselves, when we do their own internal surveys of all their customers, the number one requirement is mobility. And you highlighted that in your presentation as well. So,
One last question. Someone who hasn't asked before, maybe? Give the word back to you.
I was going to dovetail it back into that security question to ask David.
Yeah.
How do you, as a developer, approach security?
So we've kind of got 2 different ways of looking at it, and I think with the bring your own device, it's more about where your data lives and how your data is protected, and obviously registering the device as part of infrastructure and making sure data is installed on it is one part. From my perspective, I immediately think of our APIs and our trust boundaries of our partners and making sure that we're secure in how we exchange data and making sure that we're not actually giving the wrong data out.
How do you do that? How do you ensure that?
So, I mean, with platforms like Salesforce, we've got 2-tier authentication in terms of using them. We can go and use technologies like OAuth and identity providers to log on through different identity services. Some of the ways we do it now depends on the industry they're in. For instance, if we're doing something in sort of HR space, we might go look at LinkedIn. We might use their authentication mechanism to do it. So we're looking at using different platforms to make it more accessible based on what the users are using. And that's the answer that I'd give, unless you want a real technical discussion on OAuth versus SAML, for example.
No, that's fine, thank you.
No worries.
Great. Well, I think now we go to beer and wine.
Beer
Sounds
and
good.
wine sounds good.
That's good.
Everyone, Please follow up with any of the panelists.
Thank you.